House will come back to order. House will come back to order. The clerk will ring the bell. Clerk will read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions.
A resolution recognizing and commending the Deerfield Windsor School Literary Team on winning the GISA AAA State Literary Championship. Commending the Albany State University Golden Ram Showcase Marching Band. Recognizing and commending Coach Gordy Gruhl and the Deerfield Windsor School Boys Basketball Team on winning the GISA Class AAA State Championship. Recognizing and commending Dr. Charlotte H. Pipkin upon the grand occasion of her retirement. Recognizing and commending Jordan Roberts. Recognizing and commending David W. Schweiger III. Commending Kil Hwan Poon, George Walton Academy's 2015 Star Student. Commending Caroline Malva, George Walton Academy's 2015 Star Student. Recognizing and commending Blake Duncan Watts II. Honoring the life and memory of Hugh McMaster Tarbutton. Commending Jessica Wilson, Walnut Grove High School's 2015 Star Student. Commending Cheyenne Wilson, Walnut Grove High School's 2015 Star Student. Commending Maddie Dawkins, Walnut Grove High School's 2015 Star Student. Commending Tori Mitchell, Monroe Area High School's 2015 Star Student. Commending Parker Leach, Social Circle High School's 2015 Star Student. Recognizing and commending Mr. Timothy Starling on 49 years of service to the Piney Grove Missionary Baptist Church. Commending Leon Mitchell Connor III. Recognizing and commending Ms. Annie Murphy for 49 years of service to the Piney Grove Missionary Baptist Church. Requesting the state of Georgia, the Georgia Department of Transportation, and electric utility companies in Georgia to consider allowing use of their existing rights-of-way for pipeline expansion. Commending Schaefer Shimmery Smith. Congratulating the Georgia campus of the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine upon the grand occasion of its 10th anniversary. Commending Captain Jeremy Haynes. Commending Johnny McMurria. Honoring the life and memory of James Martin Brubaker. Recognizing and commending Mr. Gary Baker for outstanding public service. Recognizing and commending Dr. Charles L. Houston on his outstanding public service. Commending Lee Colburn. Congratulating Turner Furniture Company upon the grand occasion of its 100th anniversary. Recognizing May 14, 2015 as Childhood Apraxia of Speech Awareness Day. Commending Darrell Thaw, former chairman of the Georgia Society of CPAs. Commending Georgia's 2015 Comcast Leaders and Achievers Scholars. Commending Terry Parker, chairman of the Georgia Society of CPAs. Honoring the life and memory of Edna Gertrude Quinby, Morgan. Commending Chronic Chevrolet Buick GMC on their 40 years of service to the community. Commending Patrice Perkins Holder, and for other purposes. That completes the reading of the privileged resolutions.
Is there any objection to adopting the privileged resolutions? The chair hears none, and the resolutions are adopted. Okay, we are, if I could have your attention, please. We are about to go back to the rules calendar. We are about to go back to the rules calendar. We've still got a few measures that we need to take up. I do want to, Chair has tried diligently and will continue to try to work with our colleagues across the chamber, but they spent about an hour a few minutes ago debating a House redistricting bill. Historic event. Members of the leadership of the Senate voted to table a House redistricting bill. So I only say that to say if I do get a little short between now and when we leave tonight, I hope you'll forgive me. This chair would never allow a Senate redistricting bill to be subjected to that sort of treatment. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 125.
Senate Bill 125 by Senator Beach, the 21st, be entitled an act to amend Article 2, Chapter 10 of the Title 32 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to the State Road and Tollway Authority, so as to authorize the collection of tolls for the management of traffic flow. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Transportation. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Clark to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you today Senate Bill 125, which consists of an agency bill proposed by the State Road and Tollway Authority and GDOT. As I'm sure you all know, we have over $1 billion right now in express lane projects, either under construction or their environmental review. And this will provide tremendous benefits to us who travel around metro area in the traffic, as we heard our pastor of the day this morning. This bill ensures that state law is up to date and consistent with GDOT's managed lane implementation plan. In Section 1, you see we are allowing for the use of tolling to manage congestion and the flow of traffic. In the past, we've used tolls simply to pay off the toll road, such as Georgia 400, where you would put your 2 quarters in the basket and move on. Now, with these express lanes, we'll use variable tolls to manage the flow of traffic to provide less congested and more reliable lanes available to those who choose to ride in them. Note that these are new lanes. No existing lanes will be tolled. These are additional new lanes. Also in Section 1, you'll see customer-friendly language. It used to be a $25 fine if you crossed over and if you went into a lane, but this would allow up to, so they'll start at a lower fee and move up to $25. In Section 2, we're allowing for different kinds of funding models for toll projects. For example, the Northwest Corridor uses TIFIA loan money and public-private partnerships in order to fund a project. Without this change in language, the state would have to issue toll revenue bonds just to satisfy the current requirement. This change not only saves the state and taxpayers money, but it also avoids the process of issuing unnecessary bonds and incurring unnecessary debt. Section 3 adds clarifying language to CERTA's existing tax exemption. They already have this tax exemption. It's not new, and it's just adjusting the language to go with the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority. They're going to do some joint projects, and this language has been asked for by our Commissioner of Revenue in order to have their language be the same. In Section 4, it just adds the definition of what is a managed lane. And this is important because in Section 5, it talks about driving around the gates to managed lanes. This will now be against the law to drive around the gates. At this time, it's only against the law to drive around the gates at a railroad, but this will make it against the law to drive around the gates in our toll lanes. And this is to our benefit because they're going to be reversible lanes. So it will be for safety purposes also. And it's currently a moving violation to go around a gate at a railroad crossing. But for safety reasons, we'll make it also against the law to cross these managed lane gates. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask for your favorable consideration of Mr. Beach's Senate Bill 125. And Mr. Speaker, if there are no questions, I yield the well.
You do have a question if you care to yield.
I do, sir, for one or two.
Chair recognizes Chairman Rogers to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the lady yield?
Yes, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Chairman, I do.
Thank you. Who is the executive director for the CERTA now?
Brother Carl Rogers, it is Mr. Chris Tomlinson.
Thank you, ma'am. Good job.
Thank you, sir. And I ask for your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 125. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 125 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of Senate Bill 125. The ayes are 141, the nays are 29. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chair recognizes Chairman Knight for an announcement.
Thank you. If the members of the Small Business Development Committee will meet in the ante room for a brief moment, we're going to take up a small measure. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. I need to modify it. They said I can't do the ante room. Can I tell them 341? They said I can't do the ante room. Can I do just tell them 341?
Get in there.
Again, members, we're going to go to room 341. 341.
Chair recognizes Chairman Atwood for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I found $20 laying right over here. I don't know if I know everybody. Forgive me, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Wait, stay in the well till I check my wallet. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 109. Senate Bill 109.
Senate Bill 109 by Senator Orrock of the 36th, being titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 1 of Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to general provisions relative to health, so as to clarify the use and effectiveness of physicians' orders for life-sustaining treatment forms. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. I hate to get on a very serious subject after having a bit of fun, but House Bill 109 is very serious, and this is the House Committee on Health and Human Services substitute to the Senate Bill 109. This is about POLST. I have trouble saying it because I want to say pulse, but it's physicians' orders for life-sustaining treatments. I'm sure most of us have heard about advance directives. I just did one. But there are often problems with those because nobody knows where it is, and I have to tell you, mine is still at my lawyer's office. I've never gotten around to going and picking it up. So if something happened to me, whoever has to make my decisions on life and death decisions would be sort of shortchanged in knowing what I want. That's what usually happens. And anyone that is 18 years of age or older in good health can do an advance directive. The pulsed is sort of the next step, except in dementia or where you have a neurological disorder that's going to alter your ability to reason and think for yourself. A pulsed is done in the last 365 days of your life when your physician says the rubber has hit the road and your illness is, in their good knowledge, going to be fatal. So it does not replace an advance directive. It just is the next step because it becomes an order that can travel with you. If you're in a nursing home, you can have your pulse, and then if you go back to the hospital, it goes with you, or vice versa. A pulse really puts into order form your wishes and what you want to happen to you in those last days of your life. There is an exception for Alzheimer's patients because sometimes Alzheimer's is a very long disease. And you may do a pulse, according to this law, earlier than the last 365 days before you lose your ability to reason. We have had a pulse law since 2010. We have a pulsed form already, but there was some confusion. Hospitals sometimes have different rules. They may want 2 doctors to sign your pulsed form. So when you come into the hospital and you come in with a pulse, they may at that point want doctors to talk to you or either your authorized person and have 2 physicians sign it. So we clarified all of the points that were concerning some of the hospitals across the state and causing them not to use the pulse form. As I said, and in no way does this do anything to interfere with Georgia's law against assisted suicide. We have a law in Georgia against assisted suicide, and the pulse does not interfere with that in any way. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that the body pass this bill in a positive way, and if there's no questions, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions? Lady has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 109 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of Senate Bill 109. The ayes are 158. The nays are 3. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 8. Senate Bill 8.
Senate Bill 8 by Senator Utterman, the 45th. Bill to be entitled Act to amend Chapter 3, Title 9, Chapter 21 of Title 15, Title 16, and Article 1 of Chapter 5 of Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated, relating to the limitations of actions payment and disposition of fines and forfeitures, crimes and offenses, children and youth services. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Juvenile Justice, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by substitute.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the Juvenile Justice Committee, Chairman Weldon, to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Senate Bill 8. This is the enabling legislation that supports, or that is the way we're going to put into effect the protection of these young folks, children, from human trafficking in strip joints. What this does is it provides a safe harbor for children that are enslaved in sex trafficking. This provides that where a child would, at the present time, be charged with a crime, and they're listed in lines 89 through 100. Then in following that, there's also the provision regarding the childhood sexual abuse, and if this person is trafficked, and that's in lines 105 through 118, 105 through 121, we're going to provide a safe harbor for them. Now, this safe harbor applies only when they are actual victims. The safe harbor does not apply if you have a 16-year-old who has other children out there working for them and in the human trafficking or sex slave trade. That will not apply. They will still be subject to further prosecution and justice. Then if you'll look, that's in section 2-2 and 2-3, addresses individuals who are under the age of 18, and when they are harmed as a result of sex trafficking, then the statute of limitations for them to recover civilly does not begin to run until they get 18, or generally till they get 18, but they will have until age 25 to bring an action. Now, if you'll turn on over to page 6, lines 168 through 197 on that page. This relates to the it's the definition of adult entertainment establishment. It's a place of business or commercial establishment where alcoholic beverages of any kind are sold, possessed, or consumed, wherein the entertainment consists of nude or substantially nude persons dancing with or without music. And I won't continue reading the bill, but that's the substance of the bill to address these places of adult entertainment. And then you go on to line 202 on page 7. It goes over the Safe Harbor Fund Commission, establishes that. It's created specifically for a safe harbor for sexually exploited children fund, which will be a separate fund in the Treasury. Then going on from there, at the top of page 8, line 233, goes over the House of Representatives shall appoint 2 of the remaining 4 members, I guess starting on 223, page 7, through line 245 on page 8. Goes over the members of the commission, and then line 257 through 201 is provisions related to how the commission shall operate. Then line 202 through 222 That establishes the fund, and it's assigned to the Division of Family and Children Services of the Department of Human Resources for administrative purposes only. That deals with that. There'll be a total of 8 members, and that's in line 224, page 7. Well, oops, guess I better keep moving, huh? Then if you'll look at lines 289, that's section 15-21-208, and beginning in line 290, in every case in which any court in this state shall impose a fine which shall be construed to include costs for trafficking a person for sexual servitude in violation of the code sections that relate to that, there shall be imposed an additional penalty of $2,500 if the defendant was 18 years of age or older at the time of the offense. The defendant is the same thing as the John or the person who uses another for sexual servitude. And these are in addition to any other fees or fines required to be imposed upon a defendant in that kind of case. If you look on line 307 and following, requires that by April 30th of each calendar year, each adult entertainment establishment shall pay to the Commissioner of Revenue a state operation assessment equal to 1% of the previous calendar year's gross revenue, or $5,000. This is in addition to any other fees and assessment required by the county or municipality authorizing the operation of the business. And then it goes on down through line 326. That just provides how they're going to look at the fund, the revenues, and calculate that. Then the other, following that next section is how the records will be maintained. Then in line 274, then the commission can recommend changes to the governor. Section 1521-207, the commission can solicit funds from Congress if necessary. Okay, here we go. If you'll turn to page 11, it's part 4, section 4-4. This is the safe harbor portion of the bill. A person should not be guilty of a sexual crime if the conduct upon which the alleged criminal liability is based was committed by an accused who was less than 18 years of age at the time of the conduct. Such person was being trafficked for sexual servitude in violation of this code section, or acting under coercion or deception while the accused was being trafficked or sexual servitude in violation of section 16-546. And that is the safe harbor provision of the bill. Mr. Speaker, that's the substance of the bill. There are a few other things in here that are involved, but that's the substance of the bill. What this does is this provides a safe harbor for those who have been trafficked in sexual servitude or human trafficking. And it also requires that the strip clubs pay a fee of 1% of $5,000, whichever is greater. And I don't apologize for that, and I would expect you to, or anybody else to apologize for that. Mr. Speaker, if there are no questions, I'll yield the well. I know there are some other folks who want to speak on the bill.
You have a couple of questions if you care to yield.
I will yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Welch to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I will yield.
Is it not true that SB 8 is the companion enabling act to SB 7, SR 7 that we had voted on before lunch?
I think that's exactly correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
I will yield. Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Chairman Stevens to your left for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I will yield.
Is it not true that I'll vote for your bill if you'll yield the well?
I will, Mr. Speaker, may I yield the well?
Chair, gentleman has yielded the well. We have another speaker on the bill. Chair recognizes Representative Chandler to speak to the bill.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Ron, I promise this will be quick. And the old school teacher in me wants to say, please listen. I want to tell you a story. And this is a true story. Until about 2 weeks ago, I would have been sitting here like most of you and saying, this won't ever happen to anybody I know. It's a horrible situation, but not to anybody in my personal life. But 2 weeks ago, I found out that a young 20-year-old friend of mine, whom I love dearly, I've known her for about 8 years, and she calls my husband and me her grandparents. I have not always been pleased with her behavior. She's made some very poor decisions in high school that involved drug usage. But in September, she told me that she was moving to North Carolina to live with a friend, and she was going to work while the friend went to college, and she was going to save her money so she could go to college. But after about 2.5 months, I didn't hear from her. Her mother didn't hear from her. None of us knew where she was. And then 2 weeks ago, we found out what happened. When she went to North Carolina, she was not working in a women's clothing store, as she said. She was dancing in a strip place. And she had a friend, a man, who had befriended her and was taking care of her and got her these great jobs in the strip shops so that she could make big money and save for college. And he was her friend. And then one day, he drugged her, took her to a house where there were other girls, one of whom was an 11-year-old girl, 11 years old. And these girls were drugged and taken day after day, and their bodies were sold, including 11-year-old. But one night, my friend, because she had taken so many drugs, unfortunately, and her owners, I guess that's the term, thought she was drugged, she was able to slip out. She begged the little 11-year-old girl to go with her, but the 11-year-old girl was scared to. And so she didn't. But my friend escaped. She went to the police. The police called in the FBI. This had been a ring that the FBI had been looking for, trying to get in touch with and to be able to arrest these men. They went to the house, and the men had already moved and taken all of the girls. But I say that to you to say that my friend now is at Wellsprings, and she's getting well, and I'm going to get to see her next week. So don't think this can't happen to somebody you know. I pray that it will never, but none of us are immune.
All right, we have no more speakers. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. There is a minority report on Senate Bill 8, a minority report signed by Representative Quick and Representative Allison. Chair recognizes Representative Quick to speak to the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen, this is definitely a revenue-raising measure that originated in the Senate. I think we covered that sufficiently before lunch, so I will not replow that ground. I will not continue to beat that horse, or in this case, beat the pink pony about that any further. but I do rise again on a more serious note to ask you to call your attention, please, to the fiscal note so that you can see that this enabling legislation has some additional problems that I hope we can address as we look at trying to solve this problem. The fiscal note states on page 3 that the state costs affiliated with the portion of the bill which becomes effective immediately, regardless of whether or not the constitutional amendment passes, the immediate cost to the state of Georgia is $225,000, according to the fiscal note. And as we're being asked to consider further taxing our citizens on a variety of measures, that is money that will be spent whether or not the constitutional amendment passes. I also would call your attention to the cost for the Department of Revenue. The annual cost to the Department of Revenue, $455,000 annually, and an additional startup of $280,000 of one-time implementation cost. More importantly, as we debated this bill, this creates an additional commission that is going to cost the state of Georgia annually $548,000, and this cost is being incurred because we are not using an existing agency or commission to do this work, as the Judiciary Non-Civil Committee of the House had started working toward. I think the Office of Child Advocate could do this work. Any number of other structures could be made so that we would not be spending. This is money that if you're going to collect it should go to victims, not growing government. And that is the basis for the minority report. I got chided a little bit by my chairman for not yielding to questions. So I know what day it is and I know what hour it is, but if anybody has any of me, I don't fear them. So I'll be happy to take them and yield for any, Mr. Speaker.
You have a question if you care to yield.
I will.
Chair recognizes Representative Kidd to your left for a question.
Thank you, Ms. Madam Chair, Lady yield.
I do, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. I know some people have said that this tracks language in other bills that create designated funds. And while I don't think it does, in your opinion, does it track language in funds created for, like, the Brain and Spinal Injury Trust Fund, which sets a fee for everybody who violates the law and drives under the influence? Does it not, this bill, set up a fee for people who do not violate the law?
I believe that is true, Representative Kidd. I have not studied the enabling legislation for the Brain and Injury Spinal Trust Fund. The case that was cited by Legislative Counsel in the opinion letter actually was a case that dealt with the Children's Trust Fund from I believe it was 87. And I will tell you that that fund has been sort of lost from its dedication. It does not show up in our budget materials as something that we track every year. So I have to tell you that's a concern of mine as well, that when these funds get dedicated, they need to be dedicated, unlike the State Children's Trust Fund, which are not dedicated like the Brain and Spinal Trust Fund.
One quicker question.
Yes, sir.
Is it not true, Madam, that the majority of the people's districts in this House do not have adult clubs?
I think that's for every member to decide for themselves, Representative Kidd. I haven't taken an inventory, but I don't know if Chairman Weldon has or anybody else has, but I haven't taken an inventory.
And isn't it also true that in every county in this state, we do have pimps and johns and child exploitation that we should be taking care of? And if it's significant enough a problem, which it is, and I think we should, get rid of it, that we should all bite the bullet and pay for it through the general treasury.
The gentleman knows of what he speaks.
You have another question if you care to yield.
Yes, sir, I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Hawkins to your right for a question.
Does Representative yield?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that since 2008 we've been trying to move this legislation down the road and protect these children? Is that not true?
I can't speak to that, Representative Hawkins. I've only been here since 2013.
Okay,
so.
It is true. And let me ask you this. If these other agencies could do this, the ones that you named, if they could, why haven't they done that? Why haven't they come up with something to protect these children?
Well, I think that it's been a funding issue, Representative, and I think that's part of the discussion and part of the debate that's been ongoing. I believe it to be a funding issue.
All right, thank you.
You have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the well. The chairman of the committee has the final word with the chairman's time. Chair recognizes Chairman Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of advocacy from the Constitution of the state of Georgia. And I want to bring your attention, if you would put number 1 up on the screen. This is the table of contents of the Constitution of the state of Georgia. And you can see Article 1 is the Bill of Rights. Now, if you look on down there, you can see you have voting in elections, and then Article 3 is legislative branch. That's us. Constitution, boards, commissions, executive branch, judicial branch, taxation and finance. What's the most important thing that you think this table of contents provides to you and me? If you just look at the contents, what's the most important thing in the table of contents? The first thing is the first thing, and the main thing is the first thing, right? The Bill of Rights. If you would, number 2. If you'll look at the preamble to the Constitution of the state of Georgia, to perpetuate the principles of free government, ensure justice to all, preserve peace, promote the interest and happiness of the citizens and the family, and transmit to posterity the employment of liberty, the enjoyment of liberty. We, the people of Georgia, relying upon the protection and guidance of Almighty God, do ordain and establish this Constitution. Paragraph 1 of the Bill of Rights. Life, liberty, and property. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property except by due process of law. These children are being trafficked. They're being used as sex slaves. And ironically, in the Bill of Rights, Article 1 of our Constitution, if you'll go to the next one, the next slide, please. Page 3, paragraph 22 of our Constitution says this: involuntary servitude. There shall be no involuntary servitude within the state of Georgia except as punishment for crime after legal conviction thereof or for contempt of court. This bill changes our law the way it is today. It allows a safe harbor for one of these children or people who have been coerced and placed in sexual servitude. So they're not charged as a criminal when they're really the victim. Senate Bill 8, which is, just like the resolution, a committee substitute. That means it's your bill, it's my bill, it's the House's bill. We have taken over this bill, just like we have to do all good legislation. And we've prepared this. This requires a tax on strip joints. Now, I want you to think with me just a second. I have 3 boys and 1 perfect child. Her name's Renee. That's my baby girl. Now, I have a 16-year-old son, a 14-year-old son, an 11-year-old son, a 9-year-old daughter. And I want you to think about this. My boys could be on a foreign land fighting for justice, fighting for freedom, not only for you and I, but for the people in Afghanistan, the people in Iraq, the people in Europe, the people in Russia, the people in Asia, anywhere in this world. So while my boys are out fighting for freedom, we allow these thugs to come in here and have these places where they're putting children in sexual servitude. If there's anything about the Constitution that we know to be true, it is fully that there is no involuntary servitude in this state. The Constitution says no involuntary servitude. It's the first part of our Constitution. Number 1, you put it there because it's most important. When we move on back somewhere later in the Constitution, we talk about how bills move through the House and through the Senate. I don't take any issue with the words that are on a page that has been presented to you. What I take issue and umbrage with is the manner in which we apply it. It is the House's rule to enforce that a bill that creates revenue arises here. And I present to you that this House substitute is a House bill. Merely SB 8 does not make it anything less. Can you imagine asking Johnny Caldwell to send his son, who's in our military, to fight for you and I while his daughter is enslaved here in Georgia? How about Wendell Willard, who served in the Marines? Go ask him if he wants to send his son to fight in the war where bullets are flying around him, while his daughter is placed in involuntary servitude, just like your daughter or my daughter could be. Those children we saw up here earlier, those are our children. Each one of us has been charged with taking care of the Georgia's children. These are ours. We have that responsibility. This bill is a measure to provide safety for them and to provide dignity to Wendell Willard. Go down here and ask Earl Earhart to send his son over to fight for freedom while we allow slavery to run amok in our streets. This bill is the one to vote for. How about Al Williams? You want to ask him to send his son to fight for freedom while his daughter's enslaved here? Anyone in this house knows better than that. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask for your favorable consideration of SB 8. Thank you.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Previous question has been ordered. Mr. Clerk, you want to ring the bell? Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute on Senate Bill 8? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 8 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. All members voted? Have all members voted? Have all members now voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of Senate Bill 8. The ayes are 150. The nays are 22. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. We have a supplemental rules calendar as a result of the chairman's meeting during the lunch recess. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 127. Senate Bill 127.
Senate Bill 127 by Senator Jeffries, the 17th, be titled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to ethics in government, so as to provide for waivers of certain civil penalties and fees incurred by candidates for local elected office. This bill having referred to the Committee on Governmental Affairs, the committee recommends that this bill do pass by substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Fleming to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen in the House, as does happen this time during the session, Senate Bill 127 that you have in front of you is actually very similar to a House bill that passed out of the House earlier this session. It was House Bill 370. That is the House bill that had three components in it that are now involved in the Senate bill, and let me explain to you what those were to refresh your memory. As you may recall, in House Bill 370, we passed a section of the bill which says basically that once you have a period of time to get your fine straightened out with the Ethics Commission and you don't do that, you cannot run for office. That affects all the local candidates in the state as well as us in the legislature and all statewide candidates. That section is related to another portion that is brought into SB 127, and that deals with local candidates. We had discussion here in the House about a state audit which showed that for the years 10, 11, 12, and 13, there were significant problems at the Ethics Commission, particularly with the computer filing component of campaign disclosures that we required our local candidates to do. You've probably heard from several of your mayors and county commissioners the fact that they tried to file, they could not file. Hundreds of them have fines. This portion of the bill gives the ability for the Ethics Commission to deal with that problem and forgive those fines if they deem necessary. The final part of Senate Bill 127 that contains House Bill 370 is a provision that has been referred to as so-called dark money section. These independent expenditure groups which come to Georgia, participate in campaigns, but they do not, like you and I, have to file any reports to the Ethics Commission of expenditures or where they get their money from, and this would change that. Many states are taking these actions to bring light to these dark money or independent expenditures group, and Senate Bill 127 does that. Now, there are some other portions in this bill that deal with the Secretary of State's office that I think Chairman Hamilton may come and explain that were incorporated into Senate Bill 127, but I would be happy, Mr. Speaker, to answer any questions regarding the three sections of the bill that I just described.
You have some questions. Do you care to yield?
Be happy to, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Chairman Willard, to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my friend in the well, let me clarify something. On people who have not cleared up this problem with the Ethics Commission, how do they know, how will we know, or how will other people know that they're not qualified to run for office? Do they have to get a certificate or something from Ethics before you run, or what determines that?
Good question, Mr. Chairman. I tell you what I'm going to do personally, because this is going to affect you and I. I'm going to call and make sure and go to the website to make sure everything is fine when I get ready to qualify. However, these local officials that mainly have this problem have and do receive notices of this. The Georgia Municipal Association has worked significantly in this area and intends an outreach program to educate them through their various conventions and conferences to make sure that they understand, check and see if you do, and if you do, you need to get them straight. But notifications are supposed to go out to any official with a fine.
Do you have a further question?
Absolutely.
I guess the concern I've got is people will run for office who may have received the notice, didn't take it care of, they get elected, and now the problem comes up, and are they now to be removed from office, have special elections? What's going to happen in those circumstances?
I suspect if someone were elected to office and then if someone challenged them, we'd be looking at a quo warranto action. The ability that currently exists in state law to remove someone from office if they are properly challenged for not being there, much like there's already a provision in our state law that you and I and every person has to swear that they do not owe any taxes to the state. If I did that and I did later, it was found out that I owed taxes, anybody who thought that I shouldn't hold this office or any other could bring an action in the courts of the state to have me properly removed from office, and that would be a decision for the court to make.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you further yield?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. I'd be
Chair
happy to.
recognizes Representative Pizzold to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Representative, does this bill at all exempt any House or Senate caucuses from campaign contribution limits?
It does not.
It does not. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You have no further questions. I'm sorry, you do have another question. Do you yield?
Yes, sir. Be happy.
Chair recognizes the Chairman of the Governmental Affairs Committee, Chairman Reinders, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Is it not true there's no language that's any different in this than there was in House Bill 370 that this body passed 166 to 6?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. The only exception is what Representative Pizzold just asked, and that part is not contained in this bill. But
Thank you so much for your hard work on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your work.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hamilton to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just up here to clarify that sections 2 through sections 18 of this bill are the exact same language of House Bill 121, which was an elections Secretary of State cleanup bill that we passed this House earlier in the session unanimously, and unfortunately it didn't make it to through the Rules Committee in the Senate. And exactly word for word, that's all we've done. We took out the early voting part and put that in. And I would ask for your favorable consideration of this measure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Fleming to speak to the bill.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I need to make an apology to you. I was not have a chance to review completely, obviously, the substitute that I was given in rules, and I missed a part. And Representative Pizzo brought that to my attention. I thank you for doing that. Chairman Reinders was actually right. This bill is the same bill, House Bill 370, that passed out of the House, and it does contain a provision that allows the party caucuses in the House and the Senate to no longer use a middleman of the state party before they send donations to candidates running for the legislature. And here's what I mean by that, and I'll explain it the same way I did the first time the bill passed. Right now, under state law, there is no prohibition, basically, practically, for us as a party caucus, whether it be Democrat or Republican, whether it be House or the Senate, to send unlimited donations to people running for office. We simply have to send that money up to the state parties, whether it be the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, or any other party that existed. Then they in turn send that money back down to the candidate, which we have asked them to do that. This bill eliminates that middleman, as did House Bill 370. So I just want to come back and explain that, and I apologize to Representative Pizzo for missing that part of this bill initially. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered on Senate Bill 127? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? The chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 120? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 127 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. There was a minority report, however, that report has been withdrawn, and that's why that was not taken up. Clerk will ring the bell. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of Senate Bill 127. The ayes are 167. The nays are 7. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 138. Senate Bill 138.
Senate Bill 138 by Senator Miller, the 49th to be entitled Act to amend Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to social service, to repeal the provision relating to the Council for Welfare Administration. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Judiciary. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by substitute.
Chair recognizes the governor's floor leader, Representative Coomer, to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask for your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 138. This is the Child Welfare Reform Council bill that came out of the Council's recommendation that met over the last year. Four primary things I want to explain to you about the bill. Number one, that it will codify changes that have already been adopted as the practice in the executive branch regarding the DFACS director, making that director appointed by the governor and directly answerable to the governor. It has previously been a person who served within the Department of Human Services, and so we're making that office more directly accountable to the executive. Also, it provides language that will allow appropriate care providers to have access to records relating to children in their care, create a child abuse registry that meets constitutional requirements of due process so that you don't lose track of families and children who may travel from county to county throughout the state. And then it provides several minor updates and tweaks throughout the bill to align with certain federal and uniform provisions throughout the code. With that, Mr. Speaker, I will yield for questions. How long was that?
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield well.
Chair recognizes Chairman Rogers to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On your desk, everybody has an amendment, AM 33-1556. This is a bill, House Bill 537, that passed on March the 13th. There was only one no vote on this bill dealing with the dental carve-out, the care management organizations. After further information, I just want everybody to know I'm going to pull the amendment, or ask the Speaker or the clerk to pull the amendment. I've gotten other information from the second floor that possibly it may work out next year. Thank you very much.
What purpose does Representative Nimmer rise? He waves. There was an amendment offered. The gentleman has asked for unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment. Is there any objection? Chair hears none, and the Rogers amendment is withdrawn. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 138 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of Senate Bill 138, the ayes are 170, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. We have a number of uncontested House resolutions on the on this supplemental rules calendar. If there is no objection, we will vote on the uncontested resolutions as a whole with a recorded vote. If there are no objections, hearing none, it is so ordered. The clerk will read the resolutions.
House Resolution 765 by Representative Chandler, 105th, creating the House Study Committee on School Counseling and the role of school counselors. House Resolution 806 by Representative Rogers, the 29th, creating the House Study Committee on Life Insurance Consumer Disclosures. House Resolution 826 by Representative Tankersley, the 160th, urging the Congress of the United States, the National Institute of Health, and its National Cancer Institute to increase funding for childhood cancer research and to continue their support for pediatric clinical trials in Georgia. House Resolution 827 by Representative Ramsey, the 72nd, creating the House Study Committee on the Preservation of Hope Scholarship Program. House Resolution 829 by Representative Clark of the 98th, creating the House Welfare Fraud Study Committee.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered on the uncontested House resolutions? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. What purpose does Representative Bentley rise?
Parliamentary
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that House Resolution 806 could have an impact on funeral homes since it's dealing with life insurance? Okay, thank you.
I don't know who answered your question, but I appreciate it. Okay. Thank you. I didn't know the answer. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolutions? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall these resolutions now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolutions will vote aye. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the adoption of the uncontested House resolutions. The ayes are 172, the nays are 0. These resolutions, having received the requisite constitutional majority, are therefore adopted. Chair recognizes the chairman of the House Transportation Committee, Chairman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House insist on its position on SB 4 and the Committee on the Conference be appointed.
Chairman Roberts has moved that the House insist on its position in disagreeing to the Senate substitute to Senate Bill 4 and the Committee of Conference be appointed. The clerk will read the caption.
Senate Bill 4 by Senator Gooch, the 51st, be titled an act to amend Chapter 61 and Title 36 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to urban redevelopment for counties and municipal corporations. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Transportation, that committee recommended that this bill pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Roberts to explain his motion that this House insist on its position.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I'm sorry, I apologize. I got one step ahead of us a while ago. This bill has become a Christmas tree bill, and I think that we need to insist on our position to get it to a conference so we can get everything worked out.
Chairman Roberts has moved that the House insist on its position on Senate Bill 4. Is there objection? The chair hears none and the House has insisted on its position on Senate Bill 4. Chair recognizes the chairman of the Retirement Committee, Chairman Battles, for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House disagree to Senate substitute to House Bill 202.
Chairman Battles has moved that this House disagree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 202. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 202 by Representative Battles, the 15th, being titled an act to amend Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to revenue and taxation so as to provide for the comprehensive revision of provisions regarding ad valorem taxation, assessment, and appeal.
Chair recognizes Chairman Battles to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's been a number of amendments that have been made, and quite a few of them were made over on the Senate side. We'd like to get this back, disagree, and I'm sure they're probably going to insist, and this will get us to a committee position. So thank you for indulging this and giving us an opportunity to straighten this out. Thank you.
On the gentleman's motion that the House disagree to the Senate substitute House Bill 202, is there objection? Hearing none, the House has disagreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 202. Chair recognizes Representative Dickerson for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to agree to the Senate substitute House Bill 131 as amended by the House.
Representative Dickerson has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 131 as amended by the House. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 131 by Representative Dickerson of the 113th be titled an act to amend Code Section 20-2-70, 151.4 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to policies in public schools prohibiting bulleting.
Chair recognizes Representative Dickerson to explain the Senate substitute and the House amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On House Bill 131, the Senate made some changes to explain the bullying procedures, and then the House amended that, and I would like for you to consider that. House Bill 131, favorably consider that. Thank you. Any questions?
You have a couple of questions if you care to yield.
I'll yield to one.
Chair recognizes Chairman Martin to your right for a question.
The lady yield?
Yes.
Can the lady explain to me what the House amendment was? I don't see that on the desk. I see the Senate substitute, but could the lady explain the amendment, please?
Okay, the amendment is 33-1564. It was put on the desk by Representative Dudgeon, Dickerson, and Coleman. You see that amendment 331564? Okay, what this amendment does is that there was some language in the original bill, and we just added that language back into the bill.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir, I do yield.
Chair recognizes the Minority Leader of the House. To your left, Leader Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the lady yield?
Yes, I do yield.
Is it not true that the Senate amendment to your bill expanded the definition of electronic communications and also made the application of your bill more expansive than was originally agreed to by the Education Committee, and the substitute, as amended by the House, will restore it to its original version, which is narrowly tailored to address the issue of cyberbullying without being overly expansive?
Yes, the lady knows what she speaks of.
Thank you.
You have no further questions.
I would like to yield the will and ask for your favorable consideration in this bill. Thank you.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the House amendment? Hearing none, the House amendment is adopted. On the lady's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 131 as amended by the House, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines.
Jane.
Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 150, the nays are 22. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 131 as amended by the House. Chair recognizes Representative Ballinger for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to move that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 253.
Representative Ballinger has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 253. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 253 by Representative Ballinger, the 23rd to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 39A of Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to real estate appraisers, so as to change certain provisions relating to requirements for the establishment and maintenance of real estate appraisal management company.
Chair recognizes Representative Ballinger to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was a very small minor change whenever it was going through the Senate. Basically, on line 15, we changed in accordance with federal law, and we cited the exact code section in the 15 U.S.C. section 1501, 1601 rather. That was the only change. It's a very kind of small change, and I would encourage your favorable consideration. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
You don't appear to have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would urge you to vote favorably for this. Thank you.
On the lady's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 253, All those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 172, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 253. Chair recognizes Representative Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move that this House agree to the Senate substitute for House Bill 452.
Representative Ballinger has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 452. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 452 by Representative Ballinger, the 23rd to be entitled an act to amend Article 4, Chapter 13 of Title 19 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to Family Violence and Stalking Protective Order Registry.
The chair recognizes Representative Ballinger to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As this bill, House Bill 452, is moving through the process over in the Senate, on line 52, there was a change made where the registry shall be linked to the National Crime Information Center network and protective orders entered into the registry, and the Senate added protective orders or modifications thereof. So any modifications to the orders would also be entered into the Information Center. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
You have no you do have a question.
Sweet.
Chair recognizes Chairman Rogers to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the lady yield?
Oh, certainly.
Was this at a request of the GBI to do this?
No, it was not. It was not at the request of the GBI. Actually, some domestic violence prosecutors, former domestic violence prosecutors, actually decided that this was, kind of that genesis, but it was vetted through the GBI, and they are on board with this legislation.
Were they neutral on this?
No, they are supportive of the legislation. It utilizes their existing framework.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any of the questions.
You have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would urge you to vote favorably for this. Thank you.
On the lady's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 452, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 169, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 452. Chair recognizes the governor's floor leader, Representative Coomer, for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House agree to Senate substitute to House Bill 263.
Representative Coomer has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 263. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 263 by Representative Coomer, the 14th, be titled an act to amend Chapter 6A, Title 35, Chapter 11 of Title 15, and Title 49, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, the Juvenile Code, the Social Services, respectively.
Chair recognizes Representative Coomer to explain his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment would add 6 lines to the bill, starting at line 10, that place the management of inpatient rehabilitation hospitals at the Roosevelt Warm Springs Institute for rehabilitation with the Board of Regents and removing the same from the Georgia Vocational Rehab Agency. And this is already the current practice. It's being carried out by memorandum of agreement, and we would simply be codifying the changes requested by both the Board of Regents and the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. And I'll stand for questions.
You have no questions.
Ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 263, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 170, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 263. Chair recognizes Chairman Alan Powell for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you House Bill 225 that we passed earlier. And I'd like to move that this House agree to the Senate substitute and amend.
Chairman Powell has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 225 as amended by the House. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 225 by Representative Powell, the 32nd to be entitled an act to amend titles 36 and 40 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to local government and motor vehicles and traffic respectively, so as to provide for definitions to require all for-hire drivers to obtain a for-hire license endorsement before driving for hire.
Chair recognizes Chairman Powell to explain the Senate substitute and the House amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, this House Bill 225 is a gift that keeps on giving for the last 2 years. It deals with the ride-sharing transportation. Got over into the Senate, and very few changes did they make. They did agree with us on everything, practically everything that we'd put into the bill. It has come back to us, and since last Thursday we realized that we had a couple of things that need to be corrected. Thanks to the courtesies of the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, they had reached out to me last year, and if you may remember that we had put in a secondary funding source or taxing source. Current sales taxes, which a couple of the national ride-sharing companies have not paid, we had added the $300 per vehicle in lieu of sales tax onto it. Quite frankly, we did not have a physical note to that, and OPB had some concerns. Out of the courtesy that they had shown on this, we worked out some language, and that's in front of you. On line 3 of the amendment, you'll see a technical change. It changes 2 to 3. On line 5, this was a error that we had over in the Senate. It said that they would be responsible for liability insurance as prescribed by state law, not local ordinance. But then the main guts of this is on from line 6 through 63. What we've done is we have set forth a method that the new taxing formula did not go into effect until July the 1st of 2016. And we've extended that to July the 1st of 2017, and we put a sunset provision in that. And if you can figure real quick what that does, that extends it for 2 years, puts a sunset, so it'll die unless the General Assembly comes back in the next one of the next 2 sessions and does a fiscal note and basically let this go through the Ways and Means Committee. Hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll agree with that and we send it back, then we'll be finished with this issue, and then it'll be from there on downhill. And I would ask for your consideration.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the House amendment? Any objection? The chair hears none, and the amendment is adopted. On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 225 as amended by the House, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 146, the nays are 21, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 225 as amended by this House. This House is going to stand in recess for about 20 minutes until 4:30 p.m. 4:30.